Welcome to Business Coaching Secrets with Karl Bryan. If you want to attract new high-end coaching clients, fill live events, and build a wildly profitable coaching practice where business owners pay, stay, and refer, you've come to the right place. In this podcast, Karl provides his keys to the kingdom for finding and signing high-paying clients and building the coaching business of your dreams. Here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Business Coaching Secrets. It is your boy Road Dog here with the man of the hour, the man, the myth, the legend. What he lacks in height, he definitely gains inside of his, what is it, 6 inches? Is it 6 inches between the ears? Karl Bryan, Big Shoots. Welcome to the show.
Hey, so Big Shoots, this is our first podcast since Business Coaching Mastery in Mexico. And you and I heard a few times, you're taller than I thought you would be.
Really? First time ever.
This is it. I'm even taller than a couple of guys in the audience. And I'm like, look, I'm not. I think they were expecting a dwarf by the fact that you open me up every time telling the world how short I am. So
it's funny because I was going to ask you, because you typically start out with a joke of like, I always, I just pictured him taller. Like, so that's when people are now doing the opposite, you're welcome, right? So there you go. That must have, the old ego must have been just on fire.
So you were at Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember. So in Vegas, this was a good one. So remember Mr. X? Right. So he's been a client for about a decade. He's with us, and call him Mr. X. Does about $20 million a year, by the way. Thank you very much. But anyway, so Mr. X, he comes walking up, and him and I have spoken on the phone and done the Zoom thing and yada. And the first thing out of his mouth, he goes, like, we're just meeting. I'm like, hey, man, how you doing? And he goes, gee, you're a lot shorter than I thought you would be. And I was like, damn, man. Like, that's how we're going to open the conversation. Great to see you, too. So, anyway, it's pretty fun.
You've got a very tall voice. So
yeah, I'm expecting 6'2", but 5'6" staring at him. Anyways, all right. So there you go, Shoots. So Business Coaching Mastery 6 in the books, and here we are, bud. Here we are.
Indeed. And listen, we talked about selling a business, buying a business. We've really been going down this sort of rabbit hole, and we're getting some more questions coming in from that. And there was one question that came in. I just want to sort of close the loop maybe on this week. We'll see what the feedback is, right? I can say we're going to close the loop, but hey, it's not up to us in terms of the questions here. So what came in was, you mentioned concentration risk and single points of failure as risks to buying a business. So the question here is, what are the other risks to worry about and look out for?
Okay. So, great question. I'd agree. Answered similar recently, and expand upon this. Well, look. Okay, so they're looking for single points of failure, and one of the things where when you're valuing a company, risk is one of the major factors. So I guess we're asking here where to look. I can tell you there's exactly 7 areas, so this will be kind of easy. Let's see how we go. Might rabbit hole this one, Shoots, so beware. Okay, number 1 would be self-awareness, right? So assuming you're not a professional business builder and have not exited, multiple businesses or built multiple businesses in multiple industries, then this is going to be critical. Just because someone else grew, a business and they have the capacity to grow any business in any industry doesn't mean you necessarily are. And if we go to one of the greats of the greats, Warren Buffett, he'd call this circle of competence, right? Like, he doesn't invest in tech companies because he doesn't even understand them. And he'll tell you that. And by the way, he would understand them about 1 million times better than most. But in his world, his circle of competence is things like distribution. He understands Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola, if you understand it, is really a distribution play, big time. So these are the business models that he understands, and these are the ones that him and his offsider, Charlie Munger, this is where they go, right? So maybe rather than awareness, you could call this circle of competence, maybe. I don't know. I'll leave that one with you. But the bottom line is you got to be aware of what you do and do not know. And I would encourage you to invest in things that you know. And this is where people get it wrong. What do they invest in? They invest with things that are sexy, right? So that would be one that I would go to. Concentration risk. We have talked about this a few times over the last, I think, few podcasts. Okay, concentration risk, pretty straightforward, but too much reliability on any one thing, right? So if you have, say the company did $1 million last year, and then 700,000 of it went to one, came from one customer, this would be concentration risk on steroids. And then, by the way, and then what if that customer is like related to the owner? Now you got, now you're compounding the risk big time. So like one staff member, how much reliability? Think of a sales guy. Maybe one product. Again, what happens if for whatever reason it becomes, superseded in some way, shape, or form? And by doing some due diligence, how do you work out if that is a concentration risk and a concern? Well, you ask some good questions and you go to the activities, right? So if I'm looking at a business, concentration risk is something that, it would be up there with deal breaker status if I were to encounter it. And by the way, forget me, like people a million times smarter than I'll ever be, like the Warren Buffetts, Ray Dalios, etc. This is what they're looking for, right? Another one would be leverage. Okay, I've talked about this in the past. If you're going to say you're going to open up a Subway franchise, okay, what's the concern? What's the risk? What's the why wouldn't I buy a Subway franchise? Because if I bought one Subway franchise, I am flipping burgers, or I guess I'm making submarine sandwiches, right? What I need to do, and I've talked about this again in the past, but if I was going to buy a Subway franchise, I would only do it with the foresight that I could buy 3 in a small area, like with 30 minutes driving time between them. So then what I would do, picture one head office, one lot of payroll, one lot of staff, one load of inventory, which Subway, that's going to be lettuce and ham and cheese and whatever goes on subs, right? So that's like leverage, right? I wouldn't want to own a dental practice. I wouldn't want to own a doctor's office, right? Because again, just think of, like, I'm not a dentist, I'm not a doctor, and then the high level of expertise required of your staff members puts you in a vulnerable position. And again, that's why most people think that owning a dental office would be amazing. But the truth is, when you go to sell, you get like a 1 to 2 times multiple on EBITDA, which is a lot lower, than the average person would assume that they would get. They think a dental practice would be amazing, or at least that's what I've experienced by, speaking to people that don't understand this, that are learning it when I'm kind of, walking them through and teaching them it, I guess. So leverage. Think of, when I'm thinking leverage, think of low skill. Okay. You'll see that businesses with low skill, will franchise, and then businesses with high skill will not franchise. In other words, leverage franchising would be huge in the area of leverage, right? So if you look at the companies that franchise, it's cleaning company, it's the window washing business, it's 1-800-GOT-JUNK, it's the handyman, it's the painting company. I think 1-800-GOT-JUNK is the one that I would get down and bow to in many ways. Great business model, very smart guys. So leverage in a dental office, low leverage because of the high level of expertise required with the staff, not just the staff, but the deliverable. Okay. So leverage is one. Sustainability. Again, we talked about this over the last couple of weeks, so I won't go too in depth. If you want to go back and listen, I'll go a little bit deeper, I think. But an example would be staff, right? If the owner leaves, will it continue? So how strong and reliable is the goodwill, right? So that's like the customers, the sustainability of the industry, like say gasoline cars. What do you think is going to happen, right? Are you going to go and buy Ford if they don't? Are you going to buy and think investing in the stock market? Are you going to invest in Ford if they don't get their act together and start, producing hybrid cars and then electric cars, big time. I think hopefully the answer is pretty obvious to you. Or like anti-aging, the sustainability of anti-aging, you tell me. Forget what I think, forget what the industry says. Do your own homework, do your own due diligence, and then tell me, is the population aging? Okay, and the answer is a definitive yes. So then tell me, do you think anti-aging is going to continue? Is it going to accelerate? And then at any stage, do you see people thinking, you know what, I prefer to look old and look young, right? It'd be the opposite, right? I think hopefully pretty obvious. Sustainability of existing product line. Like just, think of Apple, right? Like if you think that the iPad is suddenly going to be overtaken by, whatever it is, that would be a bad example, but obviously, or that would be the iPad's not going anywhere. But think of the existing product line that they have. Is it at risk, right? And sustainability of a client list. Like, think, why is a business coaching company normally not worth anything if you don't have coaches working for you, right? Like, basically, if you've got 10 clients and you're the business coach, when you leave and somebody buys it and then they show up on Tuesday as the coach, no doubt you can see how that's less than predictable, potentially not sustainable, right? So that's why a business coaching company is not valuable. What you want to do, and we help people build teams. One of our guys that was in Cancun, he built a team of 87. He has 87 business coaches underneath him using our program, right? He's legitimately built an asset. He's legitimately built a company that he could absolutely exit, because it's not about him. It's about it's about the team, etc. So sustainability of revenues also. The numbers are important, but the activities behind the numbers are about a million times as important, right? So like an example, what if the company has a piece of real estate and it's sold off that piece of real estate? Is that sustainable in the future? Well, the question is, how many pieces of real estate do they have? And clearly they don't have a limitless amount of real estate. Okay, so those revenues are not sustainable, as in the activities behind the numbers matter. Or a better example, the company's got 100 trucks, okay, and then they sold multiple trucks over the last 3 years, making the books and revenues look more impressive than they are. Is selling the trucks a sustainable business model? Clearly not, because they don't have a limitless number of trucks to sell. Okay, but it looks like it's earned income, right? And again, if you don't understand how to take the financials, turn them around, and then work out what activities led to these, they're literally selling off assets in the case of the truck. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know how do you know what to look for? It's, first of all, you need to read financial statements, but also asking the right questions, right? You could get duped big time on a business like that. And remember, a business broker has got no fiduciary responsibility to let you know the state of the business, or they don't have a fiduciary responsibility to audit the numbers, the financial statements that you're provided, right? So this is where an investment banker is basically a business broker on steroids. If you're looking at buying a business, dependent upon the size and whatnot, but an investment banker might be a better option to you, right? Because again, they do have a fiduciary responsibility, and they've got a license to protect, kind of thing, right? So, and by the way, that example of selling off the trucks, like that's why Warren Buffett and Jeff Bezos talk about free cash flow, and basically it's something that they're obsessed with, right? So most business coaches don't even know what free cash flow is, and that is a massive mistake. So bottom line is the sustainability of the company is critical importance. What else? What's the other? A business model, that would be it. Like, think of a stockbroker or a financial planner. Okay, think of where tech is at, where it's going, the level that it's increasing. Do you really think that these guys are going to be around in 10 years? And yes, they'll still be standing, but it's going to be like colleges where it's like 80-20, right? So like 20% will stand and then 80% will go. That's what will happen with the universities. The Harvards, the MITs will stand, and then 80% will fall over, right? So no doubt, this is no surprise to anybody listening, but the college education system, as we know it, is dead and dusted, and it's just a matter of time before the 80% fall, right? Accountants will experience a similar fate. Through artificial intelligence and this kind of stuff. There's at the end of the day, an accountant, this is a lot to do with math, right? Like, again, a robot, artificial intelligence is going to take on a lot of it. Will the industry fall over? No. It'll be 80-20, and then the accountants will be doing, a really high level thing. They'll become consultants. They'll end up competing with you, as in a business coach consultant. Like, you think about a business model, like just the educational system. Look, it needs to get bad teachers out of the space. Good teachers need to get paid significantly more. Think about how valuable they are. The curriculum that they use, it needs to be dramatically updated. Think about kids need to be learning about things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, innovation, and not necessarily deep, although there should be the opportunity to go deep, but certainly at a macro level. They need to be learning these things, like these types of things. How would they do that? I mean, they need to attract private sector people like Road Dog, myself, and successful operators, rather than just, public sector individuals that, basically in the union, to be teaching at the schools, right? And in a nutshell, I'd really say they need private, because I don't think that, if it was taken over privately, would that be a good thing? And I would dare say no. I think that like public and private would need to collaborate to make what I think would be and if you look at the universities like Harvard, will get Bill Gates to come in. Okay, so that's an example. Bill Gates isn't teaching, but they'll get him to come in and teach X, Y, Z, right? Which, by the way, if Bill Gates is speaking, you may love him, you may hate him. It's completely irrelevant. The guy built, the company that he built, totally dominated. To not listen to every word that comes out of his mouth in and around building a business, and not necessarily embody it as gospel, but you'd be crazy not to be listening to Bill Gates in and around business, right? So that's so public and private kind of coming together. So what was I saying? So business model. I think if you look at the educational system, I think you could say that it could absolutely be revamped, right? Well, am I going to go and buy the local college? And the answer is absolutely stinking not. But if I would, I'd be thinking about these types of things, right? I would how could I create an online experience? How could experience being the operative word there? And how could I, bring in some private sector elites, and then also have my public sector teachers that show up on a daily basis and do attendance and whatnot, and teach the basics. I don't know. So there you go. So business model. I don't know if I do a good job of explaining that, but you don't, if something's, if you don't see longevity in the industry, what you're doing is you're looking at the industry in a lot of ways there, which there's more to it with a business model, but certainly looking at the industry. And if you don't see, if you don't see what you want to be seeing as in growth and sustainability, this is not, and by the way, I'm not just talking about buying and selling companies. I want you to be thinking about directing traffic with your existing coaching clients. I don't need to meet the local chiropractor, the local physiotherapist, the local landscaper, the local roofer, the local butcher, baker, candlestick maker, the restaurant to know that they're not thinking at this level. Remember that your ultimate competitive advantage is your ability to think at a higher level, okay, like mental models 101. Speaking of that external, maybe I might a little bit overlap here, but think of government regulation, think about inflation, right? If an adjustment in regulation could topple the industry, this would be very concerning to me, right? This is the reason why Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio are not all over crypto, right? Or think of a business. I was reading something on Facebook, actually it was earlier today, just talking about a business that back in the day, it was driven by SEO, right? Just think Google 101. And then Google changes their algorithm and all of a sudden, all that traffic literally disappears. Well, the business went from X, which was a very impressive business with high margins. Just call it, a million. It was a multi-million-dollar business, but just $1 million business that basically went from $1 million dollars of this revenue. That's not EBITDA or whatnot. That's not valuation. That's what it was, doing multi-million dollars in revenues. And it literally went to zero when Google caught a cold, right? Or got pissed off or what they changed their algorithm. That's a business I would be very, very cautious of, right? Or an industry, actually think about this too, an industry that can be toppled by Amazon. Look, Amazon puts out a press release that they're going into, say, healthcare. The mess that will make in the stock market 6 minutes after it gets released would blow you away. So think about, do you want to enter an industry where Amazon could shake you up, right? So the opposite of that is like going, Amazon is never going to go into window washing. Amazon is never going to go into roofing. Amazon is never going to go into pest control. Amazon's never going to go into, think service-based businesses, which again, what I said earlier, like leverageable. This is just not where they're going to go and play, right? So, or maybe they are. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? But do your homework and think about that. But, external forces is something that you should be thinking about. But I'll tell you that, the big dogs are not going to be going after pest control or window washing or cleaning, and really franchisable low, remember, franchisable businesses are ones like a dental practice is never going to franchise successfully. A chiropractor never going to franchise successfully. Why? Because there's 5 to 8 years of school in the way of teaching somebody to do something, right? So franchisable, leverageable businesses have low, low level of expertise as the service offering, right? So I often use being a mobile dog groomer as an industry. Well, I just go after dog lovers who love to play with dogs all day, right? And like that business will franchise all day long. I got no idea how to groom a dog, but I guarantee you this, in 3 days, I could work it out and be very good at it, right? And so could other capable people. Okay, well, that's an example of a franchisable business. And that's not one that Amazon's going to topple. And then excess. So what do I got? That's 6, excess capacity. Mistake a lot of people make is when they're looking at a business, they're looking for the perfect business, Road Dog, right? And like that's like it's a little bit equated to buying the most expensive house on the street, right? If you speak to anybody who knows anything about real estate, generally speaking, this might not be the best idea in the world. If your goal is to live in a kick-ass house and really enjoy it with your family, okay, go for it. But if your goal is to flip the house or buy the house as an investment and hope to move up into a bigger house in 3 years, then you shouldn't be buying the most expensive house on the street as a general rule, as a framework, right? So, okay, excess capacity is you buy a health spa or like a Medi Spa and they have 10 rooms, or maybe a hair salon and they've got 10 chairs. You don't want to buy the business that's running at 80, 90, or 100% capacity, right? Because like, there's no capacity for you to crush it, because you've got like, if they're at 80% capacity, if you crush it, you're going to improve the business by roughly 20% without some serious capital expenditure, right? What is like to expand, to build a second floor, to build another 10 rooms, right? So you'd need to outlay some cash to do that. And by the way, when you look at the business and it's really easily, and you can easily get approval from the city to go upstairs, and they don't see that opportunity and they're not willing to, or you own a construction company, can do it way cheaper than anybody else, and you can get it done in record time, then that might be a good idea. But understanding that excess capacity is one of the things that I'd be looking at as like a threat to the longevity of the business or the success of the business, or the ability for me to really, to buy it for $1 million and sell it for $5 million in 3 to 5 years, or to take it on with $1 million EBITDA and then get that to 5 million EBITDA or 10 million EBITDA over X amount of time. Excess capacity is something you got to look for. So look, Road Dog, those are the 7 key areas. Real simple: excess capacity, external forces, business model, sustainability, leverage, concentration risk, and then self-awareness. And self-awareness could be circle of, if Warren Buffett was speaking, I think he might change that to circle of competence. But so there you go, Shoots. What do you think?
Before I go to the next question that I've got written down here, I want to ask, because you first off, you don't buy the most expensive house on the street. Maybe you should take your own advice there, big shooter. But one thing I did want to ask you is, you mentioned You don't necessarily want to enter in an industry, if you will, where you can, I guess, easily get crushed, right, by somebody big pivoting.
Yeah.
Are there exceptions to that rule? Like, do you ever kind of go, I've got this idea and I know it's going to be good, whatever. Like, and the reason I say that, I'm going to use you as the example, right? So you're building a group coaching software. Do you ever sit there and go, boy, Salesforce could crush me? Like, or like, what's the exception?
Thanks for the reminder. By the way, I thought about that this morning. No, yeah, look, good question. Great question. Road Dog, I think, I like it as a framework. Guys, is there exceptions to every rule? And the answer is absolutely. Like Road Dog, an example I would give is if let's use real estate. If my plan is to flip a house and I know what I'm doing, but I see, a little bit of a red flag, well, I got to get in, I want to get out, and I want to flip that bad boy. Like that might be a risk that I might be willing to take. So yeah, in other words, you're going to buy a business, say SaaS, or like right now, a really good example is a Medi-Spa, right? So Medi-Spas are getting valued at like 10x easily EBITDA, which really, I think if you look at, and again, there's people way smarter than me that could give you better advice that I'm going to give you on this, but use these as frameworks. So for a Medi-Spa, I'm going to say that they belong at like 5 to 8 multiple. And then right now they're trading. And why? Because there's roll-ups happening all over the place, which basically means somebody's coming in and they're not owning 1, 2, 3. They're owning 100, 200, 300. And they get economies of scale. Again, we chatted about that recently. So that's what they're doing. So they're getting a real sexy, they're getting a high multiple because they fall into that sexy, and it's also anti-aging. And it's, again, PE, like private equity guys coming in to do it. And I think there's a sexiness attached to owning the local Botox. I also think there's a great synergy with that and cosmetic surgeon, right? So like I would do the Botox downstairs inexpensively and then move them upstairs into cosmetic surgery for 25, 50, 100 grand plus with huge margins. So Medi-Spas right now, if you bought one and then you resold it in 1 to 3 years, I think you could really do well. If you held it on and then all of a sudden they become a little less sexy, because why? The markets get saturated a little bit, then you might take a punch in the mouth on EBITDA, and you'd be taking a risk. So you just got to go into it with your eyes wide open. But yeah, always, I love it, Road Dog. You're always an exception to every rule. But you got to be able to go in there with your eyes wide open, right? Like another really good example is over the last few weeks we've talked about, it's like buying or starting a business, right? And like there's there are millions and millions and millions of businesses owned out there by baby boomers, and they're willing to exit. If you can walk into a business that's been like, the kill zone is 5 years and 0 to 1 million, and even better, 0 to 2 million, right? Well, it takes 3 years to get to 1 million gross on average, and it takes 5 years to get to 2 million gross on average. So if you bought a business that was 5 years old at 2 million, like you just bunny hopped the most dangerous part of owning a business, and that's getting it started. And then why? One word: momentum. You're buying something with momentum, right? Like, so now you got to go in, and then we talked about, you hire the number 2 guy to the competition, pay him 100 grand to come in and run it. And then without meeting the number 2 guy, he loves the idea of being the number 1 guy on average. So you bring him in and he runs the business, and then you can, and by the way, buying a business and then planning not to work there, is that something I recommend? No. And if you're not a professional, no. But that being said, there's, again, people much smarter than I that this is what they do, and they do it ridiculously successfully, like my mentor as an example. So anyways, Road Dog, exceptions to every rule. Understanding the 7 areas that I just went through as a macro level, and then break an individual one. Absolutely. But just go at it with your eyes wide open. And I gave you that example a minute ago, Road Dog, of like, it's one thing to start a business, and then it's one thing to buy one. But most people will start because they think it's a lower risk, right? Because it doesn't cost quite as much. And then if they saw my presentation at Business Coaching Mastery 6 in Cancun, they would see where I literally gave financial documents and said, look, what would you do here? Like, which of these two businesses would you buy? And then, by the way, here's an example of financial statements for a company that sold for X. And, we had a little bit of a group discussion around, what that looked like. I want you to understand this at a macro level so that you can go micro, go granular, and understand it at a higher level. And then you're going to be making the exception with knowledge as opposed to making an exception with ignorance. Do you like that, Road Dog? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense, because the other thing that comes to mind right now is like we've seen a lot here in Kelowna actually over the past little while, like Fresh Grade. Remember Fresh Grade? That's what they were using in the schools up here. That got sold off, right? Again, like that dude's flipped 2 big companies now. And then there's another couple companies that have sold out. Do you think it's a mindset, Karl? Is it a bad idea to be like, I'm going to buy this business or I'm going to start this business with the mindset of I don't intend on keeping it for an extended period of time. I intend to be acquired and to sell it. Is that kind of dangerous?
I've said this many a times, right, on the podcast. Like, how does the house flipper go? You know what I mean? Like, he always gets punched. He looks like a genius, looks like a genius, looks like a genius until he doesn't, right? And it very seldom ends well. And of course, then somebody's thinking of the anomaly, but we don't play with anomalies. We play with percentages. And let me tell you, people that flip houses end up with their pants down, not looking real good every time. I would give the same answer that buying a business, well, look, straight from my presentation in Cancun, old money equals never sell, right? So I would say, you want to build a company that you want to own forever, but you could sell tomorrow. Like, there's a framework that I would go with. So answer, Road Dog, always an exception. Of course, very smart people have, bought companies, turned them around, poured gasoline on them and exited in, 1, 3, 5 years and crushed it. But as a general rule, I would caution anybody from doing that. You know what I mean, Road Dog? It's a slippery slope, and I'd have to go down a deep rabbit hole to give all of my thoughts, and all of my thoughts were right there. Like, it's just very risky. And then, so I'd go circle of competence, right? Like, Dave, the guy who's asking you, Road Dog, how many businesses have you built and exited, right? Like, you just mentioned the guy with Fresh Grade, right? Like, he's exited multiple times now. This is a guy that I would bank on being able to exit, but he's the 0.0000001% of the population. So that's
I would look at it just from a mental model, if you will, of if I'm looking at it just from a sheer money play, then how much am I actually giving a shit about the people that I'm serving, right? Like,
exactly.
That's where you make. As soon as you lose sight of that, I think you're hoop. But hey, real quick, can you remind us again, like, because you mentioned free cash flow, for those in the audience that maybe need a refresher course. Can you just give us a little refresher on what is free cash flow?
Yeah, love it. And again, we've gone over this, but I think, worthy of going over it again and again. According to Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, right? They're obsessed with free cash flow. So 3 types of cash flow: operating, finance, investment. Again, I've gone over this more in depth in the last few, so feel free to go back. But operating cash flow is from the day-to-day operation of a business, and it's absolutely mission critical, right? So a business operating cash flow is like, it's the Mac Daddy, right? So finance cash flow is if you borrowed money from the bank, you lent money to your own company, or you took in a business partner and then they gave you X for stock ownership, right? And then investment cash is money spent on stuff like, think plant power and equipment, right? So if you need vehicles, you spent money on vehicles, that would be it. So I did an example, and again, it's in the last few episodes, maybe the last one, but like, okay, you mow lawns for a living and you made $100,000 last year, but you need to buy a lawnmower every year in order to, like, that $100,000 costs you a lawnmower, and let's assume the lawnmower costs $20,000. Well, 20 grand, again, for the lawnmower, that would be plant power and equipment. So you take the 100 grand of operating cash flow. Okay, it's 100. I may have said revenues a minute ago. Operating cash flow is 100,000. Okay, and then $20,000 is what you spent on your lawnmower. So you subtract the two. Obviously, you end up with 80 grand. So you got 80 grand of cash flow. So I got there simply by subtracting operating cash flow of 100 grand from the required investment cash, which is the lawnmower of 20 grand. So think capital expenditures rather than investment cash if it's easier for you. Bottom line, that's free cash flow. And it's, again, worth understanding at a high level. May not be the sexiest and most exciting thing of all time to learn, but if you can understand this and help your client with it, you'd be doing them a great service. So that's the answer, Shoots.
Sorry, I was just Googling. Turns out, speaking of lawn mowing, the last time that you mowed a lawn, the number one hit on the radio was Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bengals. So 1987. I'm guessing that's probably pretty close to the last time that Karl Bryan started a lawnmower. But hey, listen, speaking of things that you are good at, I don't like, this is the most dangerous question I think I've ever brought up, and I'm nervous, dude. Like, okay, somebody asked at Business Coaching Mastery in Cancun, you did a 4-hour presentation with about 30 slides and about a total of 40 words on those slides. How do you remember that much content with no notes? Obviously, this person's never had a real conversation with you, because I know you and I know how you do it. But can you explain how you like it? Actually, it is impressive, right? Like I'm talking about like actual stats and relevant information. It's super impressive how you just have this knowledge. But how do you manage to do a 4-hour presentation and keep everyone awake with only 40 words on 30 slides?
Keeping them awake is sometimes a challenge. Rhoda, I think you just gave me a compliment, Shoots. Thank you very much.
Backhanded, but yes, that was a compliment. You're welcome.
Okay, so look, I think good question. Involves a framework. Let me tell you that. I've seen others try do this, and I don't recommend it. You really need to understand your material like the back of your hand, and nerves can do a horrific thing for your memory. So, like, be careful. It's not about ego. It's about delivering the best experience to your audience, and nothing wrong with some PowerPoint slides to guide and help you, right? That being said, if you've got too much on the PowerPoint, and the way I see it is I want them concentrating on me and what I'm saying, and I want them concentrating on a bunch of PowerPoint slides. Like, you know what I mean? I want them to embody my stories and kind of get it and take a lot of notes. And I don't want my slides to, decide what notes they take, kind of thing. But just be careful that my folks traveled all the way to Cancun to see me. And let me tell you, I would never do that if I wasn't super comfortable that I was going to, deliver. Or at least I think I did. You have to speak to somebody who saw, but you know what I mean? I need to know my stuff or I wouldn't be doing it. So I just caution you from letting ego make you decide that. Right. And I've been doing it a lot. Like I said, I'd like to think I built an 8-figure business with recurring revenue. And again, I say this with humility, but I just like to think I'm not only the guy that learns it, but I try to apply it. So I try to come from a place of just what's happened. Do you know what I mean? I said earlier, like old money equals never sell, right? Like that's one of the slides at Business Coaching Mastery. So like, if I believe that to be true, right, then like selling would be a stupid decision. And I've been asked multiple times if I'm interested in selling, my company, right? Including a few days ago, by the way. And in case you're wondering, like no chance, but I didn't even entertain the conversation because frankly, it's just a distraction, right? Like people sell businesses all the time and then they wake up depressed the next day with a big fat bank balance, right? Like, so if selling was the problem, then what's the solution? I'd rather build a business on a solid foundation and pay a CEO to take over, like we talked about a minute ago. Again, I'd pay them handsomely, include incentives, right? And then reward them with certain milestone. And I would expect the new boss, the CEO, to grow it beyond where it was at when they took it over, right? So as in hire the right person and put them in a position to succeed. advise and consult them, but I'd be doing it from the sidelines as opposed to day to day. So, and worth noting here, old money equals never sell. You want to retire with income, not net worth, right? So ideally, like you want to go income over net worth. An example is most people want to retire with $1 million or $5 million or whatever it is net worth. The problem is you live to be 120. What are you going to do at 85 when the money's gone, the stock market's crashed, or your investments all collapse, right? You don't have the time to wait until it builds back up. So the solution is to own 3 houses that all rent for say $3,000. But 3 houses at $3,000 would be $9,000 a month of income, right? Versus the 3 houses all worth say $500,000, you'd have $1.5 million if you sold them, right? So I wouldn't sell them for any amount of money in the world. I want to retire with the $9,000 a month or whatever the number is as income. So again, understanding that, like you want to retire with income as opposed to net worth as a framework, and that is critically important. Like running out of retirement doesn't sound like a good time to me, right? So always be careful who you're learning from, right? Some really bad advice out there. So no disrespect, if I said many times, but Michael Gerber, right? The E-Myth guy, Tim Ferriss, look, great guys, super intelligent, no question. But like they've never built a real business, so I'm not going to follow them, for their business advice. Selling books, building a podcast for sure. But building a 9-figure business, no. I'm going to go to old schoolers like Bezos, Buffett, Dalio, Benioff, et cetera. Like old and rich is a very rare combination. So when somebody is old and rich, you probably want to be listening up, right? And by the way, you're not going to find the old rich guys sprouting out on Facebook, showing pics of their cars and rented limos and what have you, right? So Road Dog, I think I'm going.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
What?
So first off, like, are you going to answer the question, or are you going to just sort of
Oh, I think I went through a rabbit. No. Okay. Sorry. How did I get on? Oh, Okay, I was like, how the hell did I end up going down there? Oh, it's framework, right? You need a framework. So 4 hours with no notes. Here's what I do. Thank you, Road Dog. I don't know what just happened. Problem, solution, example. And you go again, example, story, metaphor. Okay, so every slide, I have one word on it generally, right? And then I use this as a framework, and then I'll talk on the topic, right? So problem, solution, example, right? Or story, metaphor. So example, the slide says 80/20 on it, and that's it, right? And then I think like I deliver them the problem, provide them the solution, and then I give them an example, a story, or metaphor to help them learn it. I digest it at a higher level, right? So problem, let me do it. 80/20 problem most people have is they've heard of 80/20 if you ask them, and they'll tell you that they know it. Well, the problem is that they're not exercising it in their day-to-day activities, and like knowing and doing are 2 very different things. So if you're not doing it, you don't really know it, which is why I get frustrated with some of the advice from the gurus I just mentioned a minute ago, right? They've never built a real business. So these aren't the guys that I'm, going to be following. So they say stuff like, we need to get everybody on the same page, which is advice from absolute amateurs, or systems will set you free, which, of course, of course you need to systematize, but it depends if you're hiring 16-year-olds, that's great advice. If you're hiring professionals and earning them, they're earning 6 figures, systems stifle their creativity. And then what do? They leave because they're bored, right? So yes, you need systems, but if you over systematize, micromanage, you're going to watch really good people leave, right? People support things they help create. Like lots of comments we got at Business Coaching Mastery in Mexico. We had almost all of our staff there. My number 1 sales guy for 10 years. He's been with us for 10 years, right? Big Al, he's been in support for 9 years. Chris has been with us for, I think, 8 years. Don't quote me on all these numbers, right? Craig, who was just on earlier, helping us out with this podcast to make sure we could get audio. He's been with me for 13 years, like a little brother. My business partner, we've been going strong for 11. It might be 12 now. My bookkeeper's been with me for 9 or 10. So I got that a lot. And the idea is that, you don't want to you micromanage professionals. I got bad news. They're waving bye-bye, right? So a better solution is to decentralize and have them report to you, right? Like you don't ask them for reporting. It happens automatically on a monthly, certainly quarterly, and an annual basis. So you break your business down into parts. Talked about that in the past, but you decentralize. Okay, so back to the example. I'm rabbit holing this, but problem, solution, example as a framework. So the problem was that they know it and they don't do it. That's 80-20. The solution is that we're going to go to existing customers. We're going to analyze the numbers and we're going to work out which 20% of the clients are spending 80% of the money, and go to them with different offers, and we're going to expand that relationship, right? Go to the totality of your offerings, and think products and services, and work out the 20% that represent 80% of the sales and value, right? So a story of that would be Steve Jobs was brought back into Apple. And the first thing that he did is, this is all over the internet, right, is he reassessed all of the products, found they had everything under the sun. And the first thing that he did is he cut away 80% of the products, right? Or another story, Steve, and I've talked about this in the past. So Steve Jobs, Phil Knight got together. Phil Knight basically said Steve Jobs gave him a little bit of, blah, 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 like, hey, how you doing? He goes, by the way, Phil, you've got a wonderful company. He says, thank you. And he goes, by the way, you got some wonderful products, but you put out a lot of crap. He said, stop doing the crap and just do the good stuff and watch what happens. Basically, Phil did exactly that. And he would tell you that meeting with Steve Jobs completely changed the trajectory of the business, right? Well, that's where Nike stopped putting out crap entirely, became more of a luxury brand with luxury margins, by the way. And here they are. So that would be an example, right? So what I went 80-20, knowing what to do. Solution is to break your business down into parts and assess. And then the knowing and doing are two very, very different things. And I use Steve Jobs and Apple, which, by the way, I think that's got more impact than the local plumbing company. And maybe I could do both. I do Steve Jobs and Apple and leverage celebrity a little bit, and then use the local plumbing company and how I did it there. But Road Dog, bottom line, I put one word up there. I go problem, I go solution, I go example / story / metaphor. And when I'm done that, I have a look at the audience. I feel like a question needs to be asked or they're losing energy. I say, how you doing? And then that's not loud enough. I get them to go, great. And then I keep going. So I don't know, Road Dog, problem, solution, example is the framework. And I know my stuff. So before I start talking, I just talk about the problem, show them the solution, give them an example, and go from there. How'd I do?
It's interesting. You've obviously done a zillion and one presentations, but that story and metaphor component, like it's huge, man. Like, how do you, just real quick, because I know we're up against the clock here, but how do you just get better at that, man? Like, you know what I mean? Like, besides is it just practice? Like, where do you go to for your stories and metaphors? Do you go for personal experience or the celebrity ones?
Oh, look, great. The answer is all. I think, again, if I just sat there and talked about Apple all day, I think that would get boring. But importantly, you brought up a good point there, right? Like where I leverage celebrity, right? I just know that the audience loves to hear about a story about Steve Jobs, Phil Knight, Nike, and Apple, but not all of them, by the way. And I think that complemented with the local plumbing company or the local landscaping company, I think there's a great contrast there. And they can see it in both. But Road Dog, real simple, man. It's just practice. And then very importantly, when you tell a story, there needs to be a little bit of conflict, right? Like, again, I've said it many a times, but, Breaking Bad, Friends, Three's Company back in the day, Flintstones, Happy Days, whatever show you watched for 30 minutes, okay? Central to the 30-minute or 1 hour or 3-hour movie is conflict. Without conflict, nobody's tuning in next week. So the mistake that people make with their stories is that there's no conflict, right? So yeah, I think practice, man, practice, and that's no serum or anything we can do. You just got to practice, man. Practice. Is that Allen Iverson?
You're going AI all over the place here. I was just trying to find you mentioned metaphor, and it's interesting because like metaphors are great. I was just trying to find it back from. So I listen to Elevation Church on Sundays, and Stephen Furtick does a great job, obviously. But the way that he uses, and he was actually mentioning it, I'm like, man, he's basically teaching us this week on how to do a presentation. It was amazing. Yeah. But he was talking about using metaphors and the fact that you use and everybody receives the metaphor. The metaphor is what it is, but everybody receives it differently. And I think that part is the coolest, right? It's no different than you telling a story and then it relates to everybody at their own sort of level. You know what I mean? Like you can give a business example and then depending on what their need is. So I just think it does take practice, but be sure that you're not, I would say probably go too specific. Would you agree with that? Don't be too specific in terms of an example.
Well, I'll give you an example. Okay. So here it is. Okay. So I remember my days in high school and I had my, what I'll refer to as my childhood sweetheart. By the way, she might have a different interpretation than I do because I was madly in love with her and yaddy. And it has a good story or a good ending. But bottom line is that I was in high school and I was totally in love with her. We'd write notes back and forth, and I would make the ghastly mistake of writing her this 3-page note. And I would make the ghastly mistake that she'd say, hey, at lunch, this is where I'm going to be. And then I would magically show up at her command to do. And you can imagine landed in the friend zone a little bit. Okay. And again, had a happy ending, which I won't bore you guys with that one. But what happened, Road Dog, is everybody listening is now thinking about their high school and their childhood sweetheart.
Right.
And their experience. So by telling a story, if I want to take you back to high school, or I want to take you into whatever it is, buying mode, selling mode, I just tell you stories about it. Like if I wanted to get you to sell a business, I would start telling you horror stories of when I owned a business and it was going swimmingly and then it all went to crap. Or I have a friend who had a business that was going swimmingly and it all went to crap. And then what I'd be doing is bringing up, I'd be making them feel nervous, but wow, I've never thought of that. You know what I mean? And this is how I would take you into sell mode. Just direct you through.
I love it. Like we could do a whole podcast just on presenting because it's interesting, right? Because I could go into a story and say, man, I remember my first car. 1975.
I just thought of my first car. I'm thinking of my Capri, which by the way, Beebs will tell you, Beebs, it was a black Capri with a pink pinstripe, and he's always teasing me about my pink pinstripe. And yes, I had a pink pinstripe on my black, which I painted. It was silver, and I painted it black specifically. I'm pretty sure so that I could get that pink pinstripe.
You know what, dude? I'm sure with your pink shirt and white suit, it looked awesome. Like you were right. Don Johnson was your hero, like everybody. Hey, listen, besides some fashion advice, can you close us out with maybe one thing here and then we'll let people get on with their day?
I think we did a good job at the end, like framework. Okay. So how do I do a 4-hour presentation with 30, 40, whatever it is, X amount of words, like who cares? But not, I don't need like multiple. I've got a framework in my head. So, and by the way, here's another thing that, the night before that, like you asked my wife, okay. In fact, you asked my daughter, who was also there, my 8-year-old daughter, and then her best friend, Ellie, was also there. But they're going to tell you, like, everybody afterward, like, oh my gosh, you make that look. Oh, I don't know. You asked somebody who was there, but the comments are that, like the question here, I banged through a 4-hour presentation. The feedback was very, very positive, and I think I delivered what I planned to deliver. But I was crap. I practice at a level that would make your eyes water. Like I didn't disrespect my audience that traveled. I sure as hell didn't do this. I didn't disrespect the people that traveled all the way to Cancun expecting to learn something and then open up with 4 hours and be a lead balloon. Like that was not going to happen. Like as an example, and some of the people listening will have done this, like everybody, like, I was there until, I don't know, like 1 o'clock. And by the way, it starts at whatever time, 8 o'clock. I was there until 1 o'clock in the morning practicing. Right. And by the way, in front of my dad, and I could tell by the look on his face, he's like, needs some more. It was just my opening specifically, right? Like I was practicing until 1 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, practicing for a week and putting it together for way more than that. But you know what I mean? Like fine tuning, practice multiple times on multiple webinars with people who weren't coming to Cancun to get it right. So 2 things, Road Dog. Framework. Before I started, I had a framework: problem, solution, example / story / metaphor. So I've got a framework. When I hit that slide and a toothbrush test comes up, I hit that slide and decentralized come up, or I hit that. Oh, speaking of my dad, here's my dad. Was I ahead of my dad? But anyway, so you know what I mean? So that, and then I practiced, even though I knew my stuff, and I'm pretty sure I could have got up there without all the practice and still done a great job. I can tell you, I practiced, and I was very, very nervous. And I wasn't nervous because, for me, I was nervous because I got a job to do, right? And my plan is to deliver. So I hope the framework is what I'm trying to bring across there. But also that, you got to, when you go to work with your coaching client and it's a chiropractor tomorrow, I'll talk to coaches all the time and they're like, oh yeah, no, I don't need to research them. I don't need to go to their LinkedIn profile. I don't need to go to their website. I don't need to know about them because it's just general. And I'm like, I get it. Right. But like, I think that could fall into the category of disrespecting the chiropractor you're meeting with tomorrow. Because I mean, if you do show up with a foundation, how could you not do a significantly better job? And ultimately, that's your job, right? Your job's not to get there and to get paid. Your job is to deliver at the highest level, and then getting paid just happens. Like that's secondary. That's just what happens. So I think the framework is important, and that's mental models, Road Dog. We talk about it all the time, right? Like in a lot of ways, that's flipping through your Facebook profile and knowing that you're going to overvalue that which is immediately available. And that you might read a quote, and like a quote is, you'll never get criticized by somebody doing more than you or something. You know what I mean? Like that's just, I know some of the most arrogant dickhead, excuse the French, right? But just some people that are crushing it, and they're just, I wouldn't, like give me a freaking break, right? Like they absolutely will criticize the heck out of you and me for that matter. Right. So anyways, that's my, the framework, much like a mental model is what I'm going to leave as the one.
And I'm just going to add to that as well and say, when you're putting that together, I can tell you that you're not going into it more worried about your agenda than you are delivering an experience and value for the people receiving the presentation.
Yeah. I appreciate that 100%. And again, this isn't us trying to pat one another on the back. This is when you go to do your presentation at the Chamber of Commerce on Tuesday, are you sweating bullets? And if you're not, and maybe your personality is just that you're cool, calm, and collected more so than, I am or Road Dog is, and God bless you. But I think that, going in there, you should be, nervous a little bit and and from a place of really wanting to deliver at the highest level. I love it, Road Dog. I love it.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Business Coaching Secrets with the king himself, King Karl. And again, if you're not on the inside getting access to the pre-show, or you aren't getting Karl's daily emails, or just generally want more information how to build your coaching company, visit focused.com and subscribe today. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please share, right? Share with a friend, share with your dad, right? I'm sure that he'd love it too. And of course, as always, we'd appreciate if you rate this episode, as we know that iTunes, Spotify, and the like give an insane amount of weight towards reviews. So please leave us a review if you like what you heard. And that is it for another week, everybody. Remember, progress equals happiness. Take care, everybody.
Karl Bryan built Profit Acceleration Software 2.0 to train business coaches how to find any small business owner more than $100,000 in 45 minutes without them spending an extra dollar on marketing or advertising. This becomes a business coach's superpower. So as a business coach, you'll never again have to worry about working with business owners that can't afford your high-end coaching fees. Check us out at focused.com.